A lot of people was telling me to do single family, but I never really was interested in it. I just never really looked at it like a true like okay. It wasn't really scalable to me. I couldn't reason with it to make it scalable because I was looking at each property as its own business, and the fact that you only have one opportunity to collect rent is almost like a hundred to zero every single month. And I just didn't like those odds. So I was like, even if I can get like one more unit, if one unit doesn't pay me, at least that other unit will be covering the mortgage. Versus on a single family, if that one unit don't pay me, I'm having to go work to pay the mortgage. It's just like owning a house and living in it, right?
Welcome to the Share the Wealth Show, where minority professionals can learn to escape the racial wealth gap and catapult themselves into abundance. Your host, Nicole Pendergrass, grew her net worth from being negative to multiple six figures. Join her on her investigative mission to expose secret strategies of the wealthy so we can all have the tools needed to build the life and legacy we were created to possess. Now it's time for the show.
Welcome back, everyone, for another episode of the Share the Wealth Show. This is the show where we discuss strategies on how to build, grow, and protect minority wealth. And actually, today I have with me Eddie Symmonett. And if you guys have not, this guy's all over social media. He's everywhere. Like, he's been doing so many things. Like, since I first saw his name, because you can't forget a name like Symmonett. Like, no one else, I don't know anybody else with that last name, right? But ever since I've seen him around, like he's just all over social media. He's very active. He's just doing the dang thing. And I'm so happy to have him on the show. Finally, I've been trying to get him forever. We need this. We need this on the show.
Be here. I'm excited.
Hey, hey, Eddie, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And I know you're going to leave so many nuggets and jewels and just inspiration for the listeners that I'm super excited to get started. Um, First, I want to ask you a random question.
Yes.
What's one thing you wish you had the money to pay somebody else to do for you?
That's a good question. One thing I wish I had the money to pay someone else to do for me. Probably like replace myself in my management company as the president. So if I can, so here's the thing: if I could replace someone as the president of the company, that would free up a lot more time for me to focus on like development and growth. As well as like looking for more properties to purchase, right? So, as an operator, majority of our time is spent in the business, not on the business. So if I had like the funds, I would hire someone salaried that could replace me as the president of the company. I'd be on the board of directors, and then that would free up time for me to go out and prospect.
Wow. And you're already at a high level. You talk about the president of your company and your management company and all that. Like, I was thinking, I need somebody to do my laundry.
Are you funny? That too. I need help with that too. I need help with that too. So
Oh, but you high level. You high level. Okay. So you since you mentioned the management company, let's just go there. So I'm assuming then that means you have your own management company, property management company. We didn't introduce yourself. So I guess introduce yourself first so people know who they're talking to if they don't already know who you are. And if they are, that means their heads under the sand. But anyway, I'll digress.
yeah.
Eddie.
So thanks for having me, Nicole. Everyone, my name is Eddie Symmonett. I'm originally from the Bahamas. I was raised in the Caribbean, and I migrated to the U.S. when I was 18 for school. I studied business administration and accounting in school, but I realized around my junior year that I didn't want to do that as a career. So I had the opportunity to intern with a mentor of mine that owned a real estate investment company that focused on real fix and flip and buy and hold in Birmingham. I went to school in Tuscaloosa, which is about 45 minutes away. So about two times a week, I would go up and, just intern and shadow. And by the time I was getting ready to graduate, I realized that I wanted to pursue real estate, instead of business administration or like accounting in that field. So I took the leap in 2017 when I was 22. I started with wholesaling, then saved up and started buying some small multifamily properties. Started buying some larger properties and then opened a property management company as well as started doing syndications and bringing in other investors to partner up with me. So that's what I've been doing in my 20s. I'm 30 now. So my 20s consisted of that. That was majority of what I was doing.
So much more productive than a lot of people's 20s. So much more productive than my 20s. I don't even want to go back and try to think about it, like what I was doing. I remember in my 20s, I was going to Thursday night, like, well, not happy hour. Yeah, happy hour every Thursday night. We have Wish 26. I'm gonna say that. Not a lot of people know that. New York City. Every Thursday night, it would be like a thing. And me and my friends from college would just go there all the time. I was also paying down debt in my 20s because I ruined it in college. So that's a whole nother story. Okay, we're getting off. I'm already getting off topic. Back to Eddie.
No,
You
no,
said
no.
so much in there.
Mhm.
I know, because you said some small multifamilies and wholesaling. There's literally, I've tried wholesaling for like 2 years and I never did a deal.
Mhm.
We were doing all the things, and I feel like it's more of like being busy with all the stuff and not
Right.
like really focusing on like the right things to move the needle and get the deal done. But that's
Agreed.
a whole other podcast. Actually, we did do that podcast, everybody, with Vivian and Vernita. We talked about our whole wholesaling fiasco. But anyway, so you started, we don't have to go into how you got introduced. We know how you got introduced now. You were interning with an investment company, which is actually, that's fantastic
Mhm.
that you got that as your intro into like people actually doing it instead of just sitting on a stage and talking about and selling you on a program or something. So that's
Right.
very valuable too. But out of what they were doing, what made you start with wholesaling? And what was attractive about wholesaling for you at that time?
Yeah, so how I got introduced originally to real estate investment was through one of those programs, similar to what you just mentioned, where they're
Oh,
kind of selling you stuff, but they're giving
yeah.
you just enough to kind of get you interested. So I
Yeah.
heard the strategy, and one thing that kind of caught my attention was the fact that it was low risk. So you have something to where it's a low barrier to entry and it's low risk. But usually the easier something seems, or the more accessible it is, the more crowded the space will be. So that's really how wholesaling is. You have a bunch of people and a bunch of competition. So I didn't do that for too long, until I started getting into like the more of the buy and hold side.
Okay. So being so young, what I want to get, because I really want people who are either younger or feel like they don't have the capital or resources to get started to understand is that you made it happen in your early 20s,
Mhm.
right? Starting with the wholesaling, even in a competitive like strategy class, right? Um, so when you started buying and holding, what did that look like? Were you using money from your wholesales? Like how many wholesales had you done to be able to save up enough money to for your first down payment? Like what did that look like financially wise, like you building up from one to the next?
Right. Yeah. So for me personally, it wasn't just wholesaling. I had some money from, so I didn't start with zero. So that's not really my story.
Okay.
I'm not
Okay.
one of those stories where it's like you start with absolutely zero. So I did some wholesaling that helped me out, as well as I went to school and I had a tennis scholarship. So the money
Uh,
I set aside for my college tuition, I was able to convince my family to let me invest that, in my education as well as like in my first couple properties. So the combination of those two things got me my first two properties.
okay. And the first two were
A
that you buy
duplex,
and held were single families?
a duplex and a 4 unit.
Oh, so you skipped single family, you went right to duplex and 4 unit.
Yeah, yeah. My mentor, like a lot of people was telling me to do single family, but I never really was interested in it. I just never really looked at it like a true like okay. It wasn't really scalable to me. I couldn't reason with it to make it scalable because I was looking at each property as its own business, and the fact that you only have one opportunity to collect rent is almost like a hundred to zero every single month, and I just didn't like those odds. So I was like, even if I can get like one more unit, if one unit doesn't pay me, at least that other unit will be covering the mortgage. Versus on a single family, if that one unit don't pay me, I'm having to go work to pay the mortgage. It's just like owning a house and living in it, right? So I was like, okay, if I could just get one or two more units on that one property, it would make it more function more like a business. Not a big business, but it has a little bit more scale to it.
Okay. I love that. That actually, and that's my story too. I house hacked it, but I house hacked a three family, and that
Mhm.
really was the springboard for me scaling up into other units and bigger units. And I know that's exactly what you did. So I want to get into that. So after the 2 unit and the 4 unit, how long did you own those? And what was your next purchase? And those help you with the next purchase? Like, I know I took out a HELOC or refinanced mine and took out equity to buy the next one. Is that your story with your 2 and 4 unit? Or how did the next purchase come? What was the next purchase after that? And how did that come about?
Looking to build wealth with real estate? Are you all tapped out on YouTube University and ready to get help tailored to your specific situation and goals? Have you always known that you were a little different from the crowd, that you never liked following the status quo, and that you're just tired of living in mediocrity? You want to build wealth on your own terms outside of Wall Street? Well, then maybe the Microfamily Mavericks mentorship program can help with that. It's a community where I handhold you through the process of buying your first small commercial multifamily building, because not everyone is ready for 100 units out the gate. Why multifamily? Because it gives your rental income a hedge against vacancy. Imagine what happens when your single family rental tenant leaves, right? And why commercial 5+ units? Because you have much more control over increasing the building's value in the commercial space, and then in turn, increasing your own net worth. Starting small is a stepping stone to so much more, because then you can tap that equity and buy another building and another and another, and you get the point. So increasing your cash flow and your ability to be job optional along the way. It's all a part of the journey. So if you think big, but you want to start small, and if you know multifamily real estate is the way for you to open the door to building a life of freedom, abundance, and legacy, but you just need someone to guide you step by step, and you want to be surrounded by other people on the same journey, doing the same thing, then just click the link in the show notes to find out a little bit more about the Microfamily Mavericks. And I look forward to potentially seeing you on the inside. So now back to the show.
Right. So I still own the duplex today. The 4 unit, I wouldn't have sold it if it hadn't burned down. So, yeah, it was a fire last year. So I made my money back. So that deal was like a 4x equity multiple. I owned it for 6 years, but it did burn down. So, a mentor of mine out of Atlanta, Clive Davis, he always says, if you own enough real estate, you are going to have a fire at some point. So last year was my time to have a fire. So I had one. And but it was a fire sale also, because I sold it and I make a lot of money. So that's just a little play on words right there. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So those were my first two. So after those two deals, I got a 36 unit, and that deal was a mixture of family money. So at that point, I had exhausted the money that I had like in my personal to invest. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I have two deals under my belt. They're doing really good. I'm doing this full time because I live in Birmingham, Alabama. The cost of living is very, very cheap. And similar to
Yeah.
you, I house hacked my duplex. So now I'm hacking my duplex. I'm getting paid like $150 to $200 a month to live there because the cost of living is so low, as well as I have a fourplex that's paid off because I bought the cash and then renovated it. It was only like 2 units that needed to be renovated, so it wasn't like a big gut job or anything.
Yeah.
The guy was just getting out of real estate, and it was like an off market deal, so it was like a perfect opportunity. The only downside to it was that the neighborhood was rough. Um,
Okay.
Right. So what that big deal looked like for me was, family money, my mom, my aunt, and then my money. And how I had contributed to it was I had an acre of land in the Bahamas that I had inherited that I sold. So it was a piece of land that, at some point I guess I was supposed to, build a house on or do something with. But I
Mm.
was just like, I'm probably not going to be moving back anytime soon. And it would be great to kind of like put this money to work, to where if I do want to move back, at least, I would have more assets on this side that could help with that in that case. So
Yeah.
that's how I was able to get money to get into my 36.
All right. I love that. So, I want to break down this 36 unit
Right.
because to go from a 4 unit, a 2, 4 to 36, that's just crazy. Most people don't even want to do a 4 unit, right? Like, how did you have the knowledge base? Because you are so like just having a conversation with you, even our pre recording conversation, you were just spitting stuff, and I was like, no, wait, Eddie, you gotta save that for the people. Like you saying
Right.
too much stuff right now.
Yeah.
But your terminology, knowledge base, like you are so like just knowledgeable about multifamily and the terminology and all that kind of stuff, but that doesn't come from simply having a 4 unit, right? Like when you thinking about bigger scale apartment buildings or something as large as a 36, large or small, however you want to look at it, right? Because of course it's bigger, but
Right.
going from a 4 to a 36 is an entirely different game.
Hmm.
So how did you feel like now looking back you knew enough about multifamily to do that 36, or was it like
No.
optimistic naive optimism or something like that?
Yeah.
Like what made you comfortable doing a 36 and being able to convince, I mean, it is your aunt and your mom, but still,
Yeah.
like
Hmm.
they have to, I guess, trust your personality enough to know that you wouldn't ruin everything. But
Hmm.
that's a big undertaking. Okay, I'm just rambling because I'm just at a loss of words. As you went from 4 units to 36 units, like I want to be like you when I grow up. How about that?
I appreciate that. So, as far as the 36 unit, how it came about was, prior to doing that. So, before I bought the 36, I had owned the fourplex and the duplex for about 2.5 years. So, during that time, I was learning about operations, I was learning about management, I was networking, I was going to events out of state, and I was meeting people that were way further along than I was, people that had hundreds of units, people that had maybe 5 deals, 6 deals under their belt, people that had been in the business for 15 years. So those are people that I surrounded myself with. And a lot of what you're hearing is just kind of like regurgitation of what I've heard over the years and also put into practice. So a lot of it is practical, but then a lot of it is listening to people and making connections and then hearing the same things over and over again, right? So that's kind of that was like what gave me the confidence because a lot of people told me like you could do it, and I got those affirmations. Like when you get around the right people, they're gonna uplift you. You know what I'm saying? They're not gonna put you down. So it's like
Mhm.
if you going out and traveling to these events, the people that are showing up at these events are go-getters. They move and shake. So when you get in those rooms, it brings your level up. So that gave me a lot of confidence too, just hearing that it was possible and people were kind of like cheerleading me and saying, "Hey, if you need help, we'll help you. Like just go out and find a deal and you could do it." So that gave me the confidence. So what I did was I looked at for about that summer, I would say I looked at over 500 apartment units in my apartment complexes in my area. I'm sorry. So
Mhm.
500 apartment complexes, not units. So I mean, Birmingham is in a large area and we don't have much apartments. So I would just to put it in terms, that's about 65% of the inventory, in the submarket, whereas like the MSA is like 1 million people. So in a population of 1 million people, I looked at about 65% of the real estate that pertain to like apartment complexes, about 20 units and up. So I learned the market to by a street level, like on street by street basis. Even
Yeah.
now, up until the point where if someone sends me a deal, I can know if it's something I'm interested in or not just by getting the address and like about 30 seconds, I would know if that's the area I even want to invest in or not. And it happens all the time. But yeah, that's kind of how I was able to kind of get the confidence to do it. And then I'm reading books, I'm educating myself. I wasn't able to pay, I didn't have the money to pay for like a traditional mentorship, like a 20, 30, 40K mentorship. But what I did do is I said, okay, I have this much. I can go to those events. They sell you the thing at the end, right? But the
Yeah.
cost to actually go to the events and get in the room with the people that's already in the groups was like a fraction, a significant like fraction of cost to
Yeah.
what it actually costs to get the mentorships. So I would piggyback off of all of these people. So you may have 5 different mentorship programs instead of like subscribing to one and paying 50,000. I was going to all 5 of them and I was meeting everyone that was in the mentorships in those 5. So I had like 20 plus connections in each group. And like, just from networking and people being willing to help, I gained a lot of information on off for free, basically. Not for free, but like, I didn't have
Yeah.
to pay for mentorship to get some of that information and to have the connections that can help me along the way.
Oh my God. And you know what? It makes so much sense because I know. So I go to the events and stuff too. Like everyone in those events, I haven't met somebody who has felt like they were being stingy with information, right?
Mhm.
Everyone who I meet and network with has just been open and wanting to help and been so nice and supportive, right? And I think there is that mindset and that mantra that like you have to pay to play, and that like you joining the group is getting rid of like the tire kickers because the people who are at most of these events are tire kickers and are just gonna like waste time.
Are you enjoying this episode? Then stop what you're doing right now. Head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It really helps our show get pushed to more people who are looking for the information that we're sharing here. We have to share the wealth. If you listen to us on YouTube, make sure you like the episode that you're listening to right now and subscribe to our channel. Then share the channel with somebody else. There are people out there looking for the information you're listening to right now. So make sure you share it with someone who you know needs it. Now, back to the show.
And that there may be some truth to that, but that doesn't mean that you have to also be a tire kicker if you're the one going to these events. Like, go network, be strategic with your networking and relationship building, like Eddie was. And you can go out there, and when you're actually finding a deal, then you can reach back. And now these people are going to remember you and say, oh, I remember when I remember meeting him at this group, and he actually found a 30 unit building or however many units it was, right? Then it makes it more just impressive and like, oh, he's really serious, you know? And then it just, I don't know, it's just it's a snowball effect, and it just keeps rolling and rolling. And I love that idea of like you really strategically using your network to grow and learn about all these people who are in these other mentorship groups, because at that point you didn't have the capacity to be able to pay for a mentorship group.
Right.
Um, that was smarter here. And I'm saying that because I wanted to join a multifamily mentorship group like years before I got into multifamily, and years before I even house hacked my first building. But I never joined. I never even went to ask see how much it was, because I knew I didn't have it. And I was
Mhm.
just like, I already know, like they came and presented at the local RIA. Everyone goes to the RIA, and they presented. I know a few people were joining, like it was a local group because it wasn't as much Zoom back then.
Mhm.
And I feel like a dag Zoom, I feel like I'm aging myself with that one. Even though that's really only like a few years, but still it just
Right,
sounds
right.
old. But I really wanted to, and I even went to like their 3-day seminar or whatever that was, but I never even asked about, like, I went to a lot of 3-day boot camps and multifamily seminars and things like that, but I always shied away from even hearing the price because I knew it was going to be out of reach. And I probably didn't network as well as I should have. It took me a long time to build up my networking skills and going out there. So you know what? That just brought a question to mind.
Mhm.
Me going to these groups and these events and these boot camps and wanting to get involved in multifamily, but not having the money to start with a mentorship at that point, I shied away probably from networking as much as I should have. One, I never really learned about networking like that. But outside of that, I also felt like, why would somebody want to talk to me? And when I haven't done anything to like I'd have nothing to bring to the table. Like I have no like value add there. It would just be me taking value, not anything that I can add because I don't have the experience to add, right? So what in your mindset before you even got to like the affirmations and the support that people were giving you to even be bold enough to go and start those conversations and be outgoing? Like, are you just naturally a outgoing kind of person, or did you have anything else in your personality or mindset that didn't prohibit you or feel like you were self-conscious because you were new?
Mhm. No, that's a great question. I think most people kind of struggle, with those thoughts. Whether you introvert or extrovert. Like for me, naturally, I'm more of a reserved person. But when it comes to business, I kind of take myself out of it, and I think of it like, okay, I'm not doing this as Eddie. I'm doing this on behalf of my company. So it's like I don't take it personally. I take, myself as an individual out of it, and I'm like, okay. I'm making these conversations because they have to be made. And there's no one else that's gonna make it for the business but me. So right now I have to be the face person and I have to get uncomfortable and do it. So I think detaching my personal feelings from it, like thinking, okay, this person don't like me personally. I'm like, okay, well, they just weren't interested in the business or they weren't interested in talking about business, right? So I think that's one thing that really can help you. If you think about, these conversations less on the personal side, more on we all business owners. With the speed of technology is very informal now. But back in the day, like, what I'm saying, like it would be a lot different, but we're all business owners that's doing this. So we have to kind of understand that we are like the face person of our businesses. That's really what our job is. So it's not really a personal thing if someone doesn't want to, move forward or help me out or anything like that. So I think that really would help. That really helped me. And then also the necessity, like the only other option I really had was okay. So I'll tell this story. So when I graduated college, I was super scared, right? I burned my ships. I went to school for an accounting degree in business administration. My next step was going to be to go get my CPA and then go down that route, right? But I took a pause and I said, well, this is a great opportunity at 22 years old to take a risk, and bet on myself. And I said, like, okay, I'm gonna give myself 6 months because that's all I really had saved up for like rent, right? So I moved to Birmingham. I signed a 6-month lease on an apartment. And I was like, okay, if this don't shake in 6 months, I'm gonna have to go back to school. So for those 6 months, I wasn't going out. I didn't have a drink. I didn't see any of my friends. I was basically just on the grind. Like if it wasn't dealing with real estate, I wasn't really doing it. Saturdays I was working full days, a little bit of Sunday too. So I just really went in like for them 6 months. And I think within the first 30 days, I had like 1 or 2 properties under contract to wholesale, whereas prior to I hadn't gotten anything. So sometimes it's like burning your ships and not giving yourself an option, like if someone, well, this is a funny analogy, but if someone kind of they have their back against the wall or they on a cliff or whatever, and the cliff is like 20 feet down, right? They're gonna die if they jump off the cliff. But then they got Muhammad Ali or Mike Tyson on the other side with boxing gloves, right? You'll be surprised how strong people would get at that point. They may get punched, but they probably would get past them and run away. So it's just like when you force yourself like in a corner and you don't give yourself any other option but to succeed, you'd be surprised at what you could do. That's what I would say.
Oh, and you know what? That was actually a great analogy. I love that. And I love that you even thought about doing that and kind of like giving yourself like you self-inflicted. I don't know if you self-inflicted on yourself. Those limitations and that time frame constraint. And I always say like putting a date or a deadline on your goals or on things you want to do, because if you don't, then that time is just going to pass, and before you know it, it's going to be 3 years after your deadline that when you wanted to do something, right? So I
Mhm.
think doing that was just super smart, especially when you were in a position where you have some money saved up and you said, okay, I'm only giving myself this much time and that's it, and otherwise I have to go back to school, and I see the opportunity going down this path, and I don't really want to go back to school. So that's like the less relief. That means I have to like basically go back with my tail between my legs kind of thing. And like show my family, yeah, this real estate thing ain't work. Like that would have been that changed the whole trajectory of everything that you're doing now.
Right.
And speaking of family, now I want to get back to what we were even like we got in a whole tangent. We were talking about your property management company and then the first 36 unit that you bought where you said it was family funded. I
Yeah.
want to get into the details about that, like how you found it. Did you have to do any creative financing with that? Like, how were you able to? I know now that when you are purchasing a building like that size, normally lenders, even though it's they're looking at the building, they're also looking at your experience and your like wherewithal and having like somebody who has the net worth of the loan. And I don't know if that's somebody in your family that had that. But just like what was that process? How did you find the property? Did you have to negotiate purchase price? Like I know from our previous conversation as well that there was a lot of rehab with that
Right.
property. Is that right? Okay. So yeah, just go
Absolutely.
through all the details and the stories and the stress. I know that thing caused you during the time that you were renovating and getting it positioned back up. So what did that all look like? How did that unfold?
Right. So I mean, initially how I found the deal was driving for dollars. So from looking at those 500 apartments, I found this one and I sent the guy a letter, a handwritten letter, that just said, "Hey, my name is Eddie Symmonett. I own 6 units in the area. I saw your property at this address. I wanted to know if you'd be interested in moving on from your property in the next 3 months to 6 years." That's what the letter said. And he had responded to it and said, hey, he has two properties he's looking to sell. Would I be, and I said, hey, would you be interested in, meeting up? And, I told him I was local as well. Would you be interested in meeting up for lunch, on me, to just talk about it? And he was gracious enough to meet me for lunch. We talked a little bit, he was in like very business. He was like more of a casual type investor. So he was more interested in, where I was from and all that kind of stuff. So we were breaking the ice. And then towards the end of that, we were able to, kind of start talking business. But that's how the deal was found. And to what you said, Nicole, it was not a pretty deal. Even when I sold it, it wasn't a pretty deal. We did a lot of improvement to it, but still it needed work. But yeah, that was my first property. I was about 24, 25, first large property, about 24, 25 at the time, first rehab deal. And originally the gentleman wanted, I think it was 600,000. Then we went down to 500,000. And then by the time we purchased it, through negotiation and just things we found on the property, we bought it for 376. Now, this is a 36 unit for 376. So it's just like around 10, 11K a unit. And this is in Birmingham, Alabama. So when you're buying properties that cheap, it's gonna be in the hood. It's gonna be in a rough area where you're gonna be ducking and dodging bullets. It's gonna be distressed, meaning people ain't paying rent, people need to be evicted, and you have units that hadn't seen a paintbrush in 3 years. So it was a lot of that going on when I purchased a property. But I always, when I'm purchasing property or doing any type of business stuff, I like to write pros and cons lists. That really helps me with making decisions. So, every property I've bought, I've done a pros and cons on, should I buy a property or not? And with this particular property, it was just like pros. You can get in a deal at a supreme like cost basis. We probably ain't gonna see a cost basis like this ever again at 10K a unit. So I was just, if I get in this deal and everything goes wrong, I could still sell it and probably break even. And I ended up doing better than break even. We ended up doubling our money. It was a 2.3 equity multiple. After all the mistakes I made, because I made a lot of mistakes, y'all. Yeah. So I jumped in the deal. A lot of it was just really just having the energy and wherewithal, to just go after something that I knew I didn't know everything about. But seeing it was an opportunity and realizing that the pros outweighed the cons. So that was enough for me to just go ahead with it. Now, as far as financing, hard money because the deal wasn't stabilized, meaning for the listeners, a stabilized property is something over 90% physical occupancy. So typically when you're looking at loans, if the property doesn't meet that criteria, it's a very slim chance you'll even get conventional financing. And conventional financing is, when a bank, typically like when a local bank or a community bank or a credit union, would lend you money to purchase the property. If that property isn't like stabilized, typically they wouldn't lend you it. Unless you just have a really, really strong network and a pre-existing banking relationship with that organization. So if those things aren't in place, it's going to be very difficult. So in my case, I went after hard money. Now with hard money, these are more risky investment firms that would fund a deal that's less than 90% stabilization, but in return they charge about double the interest rate. They charge a higher amount of interest. So with a traditional bank, you may have been at 4% that time in the market cycle, but my hard money loan was about 14%. You get what I'm saying? So that's the big difference right there. Another thing with hard money is there's no principal pay down. So although I was making payments each month, my principal wasn't getting put down with the hard money. But the pros with it was being a young person that didn't really have a substantial net worth, they are lending more on the asset itself versus the person. So they still wanted to make sure I wasn't a felon and I had like a reasonable credit score, but it wasn't as difficult as like getting an agency loan, like a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac loan or a conventional loan, both of which I've done. You know, it was just the easiest underwriting process ever because they look at performance. Performance, just your projections on what you think the property could do. Some banks don't even look at that.
So, okay, I want to interject there because you said it was 14%, but this also was not even a 90% occupied building.
Right.
So I know you said principal pay down wasn't happening, so that means it was an interest only loan. So you're only paying on the interest on the loan.
Yeah.
So with the underwriting, what was the occupancy of the building? And it was enough basically, even with non-paying tenants to I guess the more important question is what the economic vacancy of the property was, or economic occupancy, whichever way you want to take it. And that was enough to cover the 14% interest payment. And what was the business plan that showed you that at the end of it, when either you sold or refinanced, you'd be able to cover the principal payment in full, like when you refinanced or sold it or whatever. So like what the cash flow was looking like at the beginning, how much I guess you had to put into the building to like renovate units, how long like the whole process of evicting non-paying tenants. I don't know Alabama laws with evictions and stuff like that, if it's easier or harder. What your lease up rate back is, because now you said you're in almost a war zone. So are you getting tenants who actually want to live there but will pay their rent? I have so many questions. Sorry, I
Yeah.
bombarded you with a lot right there.
Yeah. I don't know so you're gonna have to help me out. So, okay.
Yes.
I think, as far as the cash flow, when I did the underwriting, so here's one thing about the deal. It was very cheap, like cost basis wise. I was buying it 10K a unit. The
Yeah.
picture buying a house for $10,000. It don't exist. So I was buying it for 10K a unit, which means each one of those units only cost me $10,000. So because the mortgage was such a small amount, the payment each month, even with the economic, I mean, the physical was about 55% when I bought it. The economic may have been 40 or
Oh, okay.
right. But
Okay.
the tenants paid all of their water. There was, they paid the electric as well because it was individually metered. So as far as like utility bills, I didn't really have much overhead on the utilities. So I just had maintenance repairs. And I did a lot of those like in not me personally, but I had like guys I could call where I could pay them cheap and I would drive them to the property, I'd get them lunch and I'd pay them. And they could help me out like for the day, they help knock out like 10 work orders, because I was doing this full time at the time.
Yeah.
So I had people I had met over the years, that was able to kind of get the stuff done for cheap as I was turning it around. So, I mean, it was enough to where I didn't have to go out of pocket. I don't think I ever had to go out of pocket to pay the mortgage payment since I like through that whole process of stabilization because I had bought it so cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. And then overall, how much money, how you don't still own it. You said you did sell it, right?
Yes.
Over the process of the stabilization, or at least you said getting to the point where you sold it, it was some stuff to be done. But how much money do you think you put into it in like turning units, repairs and maintenance, like a deferred maintenance, all of that kind of stuff? Do you have like a roundabout? It doesn't have to be exact,
It's
but
been a while, it's honestly
yeah.
been a while. I don't remember the actual like the exact number, but I think it was in the
Mm.
ballpark. Purchase and rehab, maybe like five something, give or take, five or six something, give or take. Is
Okay.
what it was I was on what we owed on the loan as well as like renovation because outside of the funding on the down payment, I'm sorry, we paid on like the down payment, which is about 20% of the purchase. And then outside of that, they funded 100% of rehab. But the cost was only accrued when you drew down on it. So for those listening, what that means is if I hadn't, so when you buy a renovation loan, like a hard money loan, they only charge interest on money borrowed. So you will have an escrow account basically of 300,000 rehab money, but you're not getting charged for that until you take out 50,000. 100,000. That's when you start paying on it. So I had that money set aside, but at the same time, when we would draw down on it, we would get units ready. So let's say I was able to finish 6 units. I would draw down on that money, but I also had more revenue coming in now because the units was occupied. You get what I'm saying? So as I'm turning units and getting stuff filled, even though my payment is going up, my revenue is going up too. So that's kind of like how it was like set up.
Okay. And with getting those units filled, was it difficult finding good tenants to put in there so that you didn't have repeat of like non-paying or deferred rent payments and things like that?
Okay, guys, don't kill me, but I'm going to have to cut this episode short. This is too juicy, and we need to do this in a part 2. So stay tuned for the next episode that airs, and you can hear the rest of our conversation.
Did you love this episode of Share the Wealth Show? Be sure to connect with Nicole by following her on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook. If you picked up any of the gems that were dropped by today's guest, make sure you not only put them in your bag, but if you know of someone who would benefit from this information, don't keep it to yourself. Share the wealth and make sure to leave us a rating and review. We'll see you for next week's episode. Subscribe so you'll be notified.